believe that nonsense.
Some people think that that's not just applicable within the boundaries of the United States, but that it applies to everyone.
Maybe that's the real reason that Shinzo Abe was sent to Iran. It was to talk to Iran about how great it was having U.S. military bases on your territory.
Yeah, maybe.
And another thing about the idea of Iran as an insane country that wants to nuke Iran. So not only does that not map out with how Iran behaves, it doesn't map out with how Israel behaves or how the United States behaves. We also have it straight from the horse's email server that's also not the reason. So if you look at WikiLeaks and the emails that they didn't hack, you can see a quote, and let me just find the exact section. For Israeli leaders, the real threat from a nuclear-armed Iran is not the prospect of an insane Iranian leader launching an unprovoked Iranian nuclear attack on Israel that would lead to the annihilation of both countries. What Israeli leaders really worry about, but cannot talk about, is losing their nuclear monopoly. By the way, that means that we now have semi-official confirmation from, again, Hillary's emails that Israel has nukes. An Iranian nuclear weapons capability would not only end that nuclear monopoly, but could also prompt other adversaries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt to go nuclear as well. For Egypt, it would be re-going nuclear. They had nukes and then they gave up on the program. The result would be a precarious nuclear balance in which Israel could not respond to provocations with conventional military strikes on Syria and Lebanon as it can today. If Iran were to reach the threshold of a nuclear weapon state, Tehran would find it much easier to call on its allies in Syria and Hezbollah to strike Israel, knowing that its nuclear weapons would serve as a deterrent to Israel responding against Iran itself. In other words, Israel is currently in a position where it can bomb its neighbors with impunity. If Iran had a nuke, it wouldn't be able to do that anymore. And that's bad. It's really important that some states be able to bomb other states without fear of consequence.
Yeah, this is the same argument that Hillary would make with regards to like gun control.
Yes.
It's important that the cops have guns that only they have guns so that they can shoot black people and get away with it. Right, Marcel?
Mm-hmm. All right. And I think that's about it. Oh, another thing. So just one last thing. So it's about Tucker Carlson again.
There's
so
something
Tucker
about
Carlson
the phrase, I think we're all set, or like that triggers things in your head every time. You'll go, so that's the last thing we want to say. I do have one more thing I want to say.
Yeah, it's like walking out.
You're like the old man at the town hall meeting who's just been talking for 30 minutes straight, and then he's like, I do have one point I'd like to make. He's got a bunch of ruffled papers.
Yep.
Like, you've been making points the whole time.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, again, Tucker Carlson has been, batting 1,000 as far as anti-war takes go, and he had Glenn Greenwald on. I finally said his name right. He had Glenn Greenwald on, and they were talking about, the absolutely shameful manner in which the media has been going against Donald Trump. I can't believe that sentence escaped my mouth. Right, going against Donald Trump for not presidentially bombing these ground people. Another person who has also been clamoring for war and now having everybody turn against him is, of course, Ben Shapiro, who tweeted, disproportionate response. Oh, let's do this right. Disproportionate response to attacks on U.S. assets are a good way of showing our enemies that we will mass them if they continue to escalate. The U.S. doesn't want war. You know who doesn't want war even more? The Ayatollahs, who will find themselves quite dead if war occurs. That's Ben Shapiro explicitly saying that he wants a disproportionate response. Now, of course, Ben Shapiro will never fight in the military, at least not the American military. A lot of conservatives have finally started to become anti-war. And I'm actually very happy to see this transformation that the conservative movement has made as they shift into this anti-war mode, right? And I like to think that libertarians have played a leading role in this because there was a time, like 10 years ago that this wouldn't have happened. I mean, we know it, right? Even now that conservatives are in power, they haven't shifted back into being the war party.
Yes.
And so all of these pro-war voices on the right are finding themselves increasingly isolated. And it's really good to watch. Because...
Oh, yeah. It's almost as if the American right were being reclaimed.
Yes.
In a phrase I just came up with.
Yeah. We were betrayed before. There was a betrayal of the American, which is a phrase I just made up.
That's a nice phrase, too. That's why we have a podcast.
That's why we have a podcast, because we think of great things like that.
Yeah, it is nice to see. And we have to thank Ron Paul for that.
Yes.
He won't get the credit. Trump would get all the credit. Because the media that has a 10-second memory span will go, well, Trump is president now, and now things are changing. So obviously, all changes must happen instantly, and there's no groundwork or time to that these things take to sort of manifest or come about. I can remember Ron Paul in 2008 getting booed by Republicans, and then in 2012 making the same points, and it was a much better reaction. And in 2016, Donald Trump said that the Iraq War was a big fat mistake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That thing with Jeb was the best when he was saying, 9/11 happened on Bush's watch, and he didn't keep us safe at all.
That was the one. That was the final domino. Again, it took a lot of groundwork being laid by people like Ron Paul to prime a Republican audience to allow themselves to go back to thinking that way, because they had been so bamboozled in their post 9/11 years. So the priming had been done, and they were ready for it then, so that you could finally make this point that was so obvious, but that everyone was afraid to make, which was that everyone used to point to 9/11 and say there was never another terrorist attack while Bush was president. Yeah, only the biggest one in history. Like, just because you had that one and then there was never another one, that was always like pointed as a point of pride by the Republicans. That, did you know that after the biggest attack in history, there was not another one? It's like, well, isn't that up to them? Isn't that up to the terrorists? Like, if they wanted another one, wouldn't they?
Why would they attack us again? The first one worked. They got exactly what they wanted.
Well, that was the other thing is, it's like, well, they tried to, they're like, oh, we had the first World Trade Center attack and then the USS Cole and all this. And it's like, yeah, they kept trying. And the one that actually worked is when they stopped.
Yeah.
That's not, and then you claim success and go, we beat them. It's like, they killed 3,000 people. And only Donald Trump finally pointed that out and said, 9/11 happened under your brother's watch. That's not a point of pride. That's a point of shame. It's a point against it. And then the Republican audience was finally primed to go, wait a minute, Bush was president when 9/11 happened.
It's like two gears that are like covered in cobweb that finally start turning again. And it's like, wait a second.
I always thought Obama was president during 9/11.
Right.
Like, actually, wait a minute, it was George Bush. I remember him standing on the rubble now.
Yeah, I got to emphasize that again. The reason that you didn't see big terror attacks after 9/11 was because 9/11 accomplished its goal. The goal of 9/11 was to make us invade Iraq and Afghanistan.
Was to draw the American army into a quagmire.
That was explicitly what Osama bin Laden wanted. There was no reason. There's literally no reason. After that, you can just keep attacking Americans in Iraq, which was, in fact, the entire point, again, of 9/11. Right. Yeah. It wasn't because the NSA was that great. It was because they played Bush like a fiddle. Yeah,
exactly. It was, we'll hit them hard on their own territory, and then they will come fight over here where we can beat them.
Yeah. And that means also Osama bin Laden did not believe this insane lie that Osama bin Laden has actually said, actually a lot of people in America want war. They just need a reason, and I'm going to give it to them.
Yes. Was he wearing Joker makeup when he said that?
These people need a better class of terrorists, and I'm
because we know he was a gamer.
Yes,
those pictures of his gamer dungeon. He really did live in a society, didn't he? So we're gonna move on to I guess it's still Orange Man bad news, right?
The Norway scandal? Yeah. So I think that took about 20 minutes or a half hour.
The Norway collusion scandal.
Yes, NorwayGate.
We have to break this into 2 episodes. Clown World being its own.
We can talk about NorwayGate.
So, in a great interview with Donald Trump, there's a lot of fighting going back and forth between them, because we have to remember that George Stephanopoulos used to work for the Clinton administration, and by used to, it's like being in the CIA. He still works for them. So, a Clinton surrogate came to the White House to interview the president, who beat Clinton, and tried to trap him with a very low IQ verbal trick. And the idea was that he was going to not directly ask about this, what was the meeting? The Trump Tower meeting with Don Jr. and a person who was from Russia. But instead he was going to change it slightly and say, in 2016, in the next election, if someone from Russia came to you with information about your opponent, would you take it or would you go to the FBI? And Donald Trump, first of all, ridiculed the question. When you watch the whole clip, he says, like, how do you think the world works? He goes, how many times have you gone to the FBI in your life? He goes, I've never gone to the FBI. He goes, what is that like? That's not how the world works, George. Oh, so I get a phone call from someone I don't know. And
Donald Trump said no snitching.
And they said, oh, we have information about Hillary Clinton. And I'm supposed to hang up the phone and call the FBI and say, someone I don't know has information about Hillary Clinton. And they're going to say what? Like, thanks for wasting our time. I don't like, what if that information was, did you know that her husband signed a crime bill? And then he goes to the FBI and they go, oh, yeah, we looked into that claim and it was publicly available knowledge. And the person was just a tourist from Russia who thought they could bluff their way into a meeting with Donald Trump, and they did. So thanks for wasting our resources. Like, but anyway, so he asked him, would you take the help or would you go to the FBI? And then Trump said, depending on the situation, I think you do both. You listen because you're not going to turn down free information. And then if it's something where you think, okay, the FBI should be involved, this is something suspicious about this, then you do both. And the media lost their minds.
Well, let's not forget what country he gave an example. That's the most important part.
Yes, that's true. George Stephanopoulos gave the example of Russia. And then Trump goes, let's say a country calls Norway. And he changes it immediately to Norway, which should have diffused the verbal trap, but no one actually listened. So the way that story was played was in reality, Donald Trump said, if Norway called me, which is just a funny sentence too, because Norway's on the phone, and they said they had information about, Elizabeth Warren or whatever. He would take it, and then if he thought there was something suspicious about it, he'd call the FBI. The way it was reported was that Donald Trump said if Russia called him again with more information, he would not go to the FBI, which is not what happened. And also, we have to remember, during the first meeting with Don Jr., this Russia thing had not yet been spun up by the Hillary Clinton campaign yet. That only came up later, after they were going to lose, to help explain the loss. But this Russian psyop did not exist at the time. So, just the idea that someone who happens to be Russian would call me and I would wet my pants and call the FBI didn't exist at that time because Russia was just a country. And, we had escalating tensions with them and all that, but it was not this thing. There was no...
Indeed, if you thought that Russia was our biggest geopolitical threat, as Barack Obama said, 1985 called in and wants its foreign policy back.
Yes, exactly. Which, Mitt Romney got drummed out of politics for that. And then 5 years later, it's the official campaign line of the Democrat. It's the new party line, yeah.
And so this gaffe was so major that Sarah Huckabee Sanders resigned.
Which is hilarious because I actually watched it in context. I don't even consider it a gaffe.
I know.
It's ridiculous. But
gaffe is a very strange word, but the media loves it, and I'm not really sure why.
And speaking of gaffes...
You're going to have to give that one. I don't know. Are you segueing to the New York Times cartoon or to the YouTube route? What?
Oh, I don't remember. I just remembered that our Clown World segment...
Oh, yeah, but we got to talk about the fake news media just a little more. So the New York Times ran an article called... Okay, well, now I can't find it.
Oh, are you maxed out?
Oh, I will be very upset if I am.
You gotta pay them $1 per word or whatever?
I will never pay the New York Times.
It's especially funny with Washington Post because when I will click a link to the Washington Post, I don't know why I would do that, but then when I try to actually read an article, and right under the Democracy Dies in Darkness is the pop-up that says, if you want to read this article, you have to pay us. And it's like, really?
Okay, so here's the New York Times. So it's the making of a YouTube radical. We're just going to talk about this for just 5 minutes, hopefully. So Caleb Kane was a college dropout looking for direction. He turned to YouTube. Soon, he was pulled into a far-right universe, watching thousands of videos filled with conspiracy theories, misogyny, and racism. I was brainwashed, he said. Now, first of all, this is one of those important New York Times articles. It's one they think is critical because it's interactive and it's got the fancy what's it called? The fancy web design. Let's look at who some of these people are. First of all, I don't recognize 2 of these people. One of them is Ben Shapiro. One of them is some black guy sitting in his car. Those YouTubers who just set up their phone on the dashboard and talk while they drive. We got Tommy Loren.
I like how you dismissed that like this isn't just a step above that.
Right.
There's 2 of us, and we have edited.
There's 2 of us, and I edit the sound, so we're better than. Yeah, I'm not filming this in my car. You did record an episode from your car, though, so actually, we are barely a half step up.
I was literally all I needed was a rant Sona.
Yeah. We got Stefan Molyneux, we got Milo, we got George. These are the far right